of the Kent School District, which is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. The purpose of this meeting is a work session to discuss the strategic plan status update and a multilingual education program update. I'm going to go ahead and call roll call if I can. Director Song.
Present.
Director Cook.
Present.
I'm present. Vice President Farah is absent and excused, and of course, President Margell is en route. I'm now going to call upon Superintendent Vela for introductions.
Thank you so much, Director Clark, and welcome to our board. And I also want to welcome our teams for today's work session. Before I begin and introduce to you our leaders who will be introducing the teams to you, I wanted just to say that I've been looking forward to this opportunity to share as a district and as a system how we're doing on the strategic plan goals that we have landed on. And I'm also excited for the board to hear a little bit more about from our team about our multilingual education learners and our programs. I think you're going to find it real interesting and exciting. As one of the most diverse districts in the state, if not our country, it's important for us to really hear who our students and staff are that provide the support in meeting our goals. And welcome to President Margell. So I will go ahead and turn it over to Mr. Spencer Pan, our Senior Executive Director of Strategic Initiatives and Operations. Mr. Pan.
Thank you, Israel. And as I begin, just welcome to this evening. Thank you, President Margell, members of the board, Superintendent Vela. I want to start with introductions of my team. So joining me here today at this table is Dr. Ashley Birkland, our Executive Director of Performance Outcomes, Assistant Director Lizzie Barker, our Assistant Director of Research and Evaluation, Sarah Dumlau, our Director of Accountability and Strategy, and Ms. Allison Liao, our Project Specialist. Couple housekeeping components here. We want to preserve, I think, the bulk of the time for questions and dialogue in this space, and so we're going to move quickly through some of the slides here. Want to try to at least preserve about half of that time for that. The other component is when we reach that point, you'll see there's a lot of other colleagues at this table, subject matter experts in their areas for both their leadership around the strategic plan priority initiatives as well as content areas. And so want to really preserve space and time for that as well. Thanks for moving the slide. The first slide here, there's a lot of text on there, and that's mostly for definitions and clarity. But I really want to focus us less around the content of this slide and more around a question. And the question I think of is, what is at stake for the district? Right? Every organization, whether it is a business, whether it is a school district, or any other organization, knows very clearly what its purpose is. And for us, trying to answer that question of what's at stake, we have those 4 goals, right? And that's really our answer to this. So for us, that is preparing students to be global citizens, expanding student, family, and community partnerships, building equitable systems and school environments, and investing in a diverse workforce and inclusive workplace cultures. And our way of measuring that, right, because we can have those goals, but how do we know that we are moving towards them, accomplishing them, or otherwise? Those are really rested in our measures. And so tonight, we're going to share with you also an update around where we are with those measures. We can move to that next slide. So here, I think many of you have seen this before. This is really a capture of where we are in the life cycle of the strategic plan. And we are in year 2 of this present strategic plan's implementation. And a couple key details here. The first is that the orange boxes you see showcase that our priority initiatives do change from year to year. And that is, some things are accomplished, some things are newly beginning, some things are continuing. The question I ask on this slide is really, what accomplishments should we develop, improve, or support, right? And I think about this in terms of the value that all of us as members of this organization add is not in time spent, right? It's not in how much time we put into things, but really in the results, the accomplishments that we produce. And so when we get to sharing with you around our strategic plan updates, you'll notice that the highlight and the way we go about sharing those updates are really organized around accomplishments. What has been accomplished, what we seek to accomplish. We're not going to detail to you a lot of like what you might see on a typical planning process where it says, by this date and these times and amount of time we spend on it, because those are actually less relevant than the things that are produced out of the efforts put into the plan. And so with that, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Ashley Birkeland to talk about our measures, and then following that, we'll share with you the strategic plan priority initiative updates.
All right. Thank you, Spencer. Good evening to the board. Thank you for having us here for this opportunity to share our year one measure results. A few things before we get started. The dashboard that you heard about last year is available now, and it's on our website. We're not looking at that today just for the visuals of being able to go through. It's the exact same data on the PowerPoint slides, but just using that, but know that the same information is available to our community public-facing website. That dashboard is there for our strategic plan. Also, you're going to notice as we go through, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the numbers. We leave those to you to sit, make meaning with all of that, but we will call out how some of those measures were calculated, remind you of some of those pieces and the clarity there. And then also just a reminder, we're looking at system level results here, really at the district level. We know they look different at schools by grade level, by different student groups, but we're looking at that systems level here for the purpose of the strategic plan. Right. With that, I will jump into goal 1 here, which are our measures around preparing students to be global citizens. So one thing we'll call out here is our 4-year graduation rate. This is our latest graduation rate. Also, you'll notice the star by the baseline. Due to when we were pulling the strategic plan together, some data wasn't available, and when the star is there, that means our baseline was the 21-22 school year. If the star isn't there, the baseline was from the 22-23 school year, so just calling that out on each of the slides. So we do have that updated graduation rate, and this is the 4-year cohort, so those students that start in 9th grade graduate 4 years later. We know there's also 5-year, 6-year, but we have the 4-year cohort here. And then calling your attention to 1.3 and 1.4 around our measures of growth. Those are based on our iReady assessment, and they're based on the percentage of students meeting their typical growth goal. So based on how students perform in the fall, they all get a growth goal, and then in the spring, we're able to see if they met that goal or not. So that is how that one is measured. Moving on into this next set, you're going to see our state assessments here, looking at our Smarter Balanced Assessment for English Language Arts and Math and our Washington Comprehensive Assessment of Science for Science, and noting here that proficiency is the percent of students who scored a level 3 or a level 4. So that is what we're looking at here, and this is district-wide, so across all grades in those content areas. And then the last set of Goal 1 measures here, calling your attention to 1.10, the number of student racial ethnic groups experiencing disproportionately high exclusionary discipline. So there we're looking to reduce the number of groups who have disproportionately high discipline, so the rate is higher than the percent of students in that population. So looking here, seeing where the baseline and where we are now. And then the last one here, the percent of staff participating in professional development offerings, really want to call attention to the fact that this is all staff, not just teaching staff. So all our staff in KSD have access to those opportunities, and we work with our PD department to be able to pull that data and have professional development that is tagged as being in that high impact category. So we're going to keep moving along here, and I am going to pass it over to our Assistant Director of Research and Evaluation, Lizzie Barker, for Goal 2 and beyond.
Thanks, Ashley. And so we're going to move on to Goal 2 right now, and as a reminder, that's expanding student, family, and community partnerships. So the measures for this goal area are really looking at enriching those community partnerships within our community and thinking about the lens of engagement. So we'll call out a couple of the measures here. First, 2.1, the number of students who participate in leadership, are looking at the number of students who are participating in leadership classes, or those classes that are coded in our course catalog or student information system as leadership. We recognize that there is more opportunities to participate in leadership for our students than just participating in classes that are coded this way. But this was the centralized source of data that we had at the time of writing the plan, so we've continued that consistency. We also wanted to call out 2.5, which is the number of schools engaging in youth participatory action research projects, or YPAR projects. YPAR is a philosophical approach to empowering students to act as leaders and change agents in their schools. And in the past, we've seen that work emerge through the design team work that the board has seen in the past on teams that have occurred at the comprehensive high schools and Kent Lab Academy. Okay, so moving right along, we're going to look at Goal 3 measures now. Goal 3 is focusing on building equitable systems in school environments. So we're really thinking about environments for this one, not just in terms of physical environments, but also access to programs. So thinking about increasing equitable access. So here we'll go through some definitions and context for some of these measures. So for measure 3.1, core classes here does not include elective classes or specials. For 3.3, we wanted to note that collecting data for this measure depends on a priority initiative work of creating a process for schools to provide supplies to all students. We haven't started the priority initiative work, like Spencer said at the beginning. Some of those projects will ramp up over the course of the 5 years of the plan. So we are still working on developing the planning for that priority initiative work. In 3.4, we'll call your attention to that one. The average years of teaching experience data comes from OSPI's data portal. So you'll notice that for this indicator, it says for 23-24, the data is not yet available because OSPI hasn't posted that information yet. They typically post it in January, so we'll be able to update that later on this year. We also wanted to note that there are 23 schools in Kent School District who receive federal funding for Title I programming. While all of our schools receive federal funds, we're leveraging additional funding at these schools by using our Title I funding through that opportunity. And then finally, we wanted to call out for Measure 3.5 that we're referring to the underrepresentation of students experiencing low income participating in extracurricular activities. Essentially what this means is that we're trying to decrease the gap between students who are participating in extracurricular activities for students who are or are not experiencing low income. So that's a lot to go through, and we'll kind of start to wrap it up with Goal 4 here. So Goal 4 is looking at investing in a diverse workforce and inclusive workplace cultures. So really what we're focusing on for these measures are staff and staff experiences. So we'll provide some more context here as well as some of those definitions. So when we look at 4.1, this percentage is based off of the participation in the Teaching Mentor program, though the vision for this measure is to expand mentorship to other staff groups. And then for 4.3, vacancy rate is calculated based off of certificated staff at schools. And then we'll have one more slide to cover the rest of the measures for Goal 4. We want to point out that like Measure 3.3 in our previous goal, Measures 4.4 and 4.5 both come from a priority initiative process that we're continuing to work on rolling out this year. So these measures come from the Inclusive Spaces rubric and review process. As you might remember from last year, that's a priority initiative to develop the criteria and supports for creating that Inclusive Spaces designation, and this work is still ongoing into this year. We also want to call out some definitions around 4.6 as well, and that employee satisfaction index is calculated based off of responses to a series of 10 satisfaction questions on the annual staff climate survey. Staff respond to a 1 to 10 scale rating across those 10 questions. And then finally, 4.7 is our employee net promoter score. An employee net promoter score is a system for designating and helping employers measure employee satisfaction and loyalty within the organization. It's connected to a question in our annual staff climate survey, and the value is calculated based off of a standard industry formula. So with that, we are going to transition now, so thank you for giving us the opportunity to report out on the strategic plan measures for 23-24, and I'm going to share the screen with Sarah Dumlau to talk about our priority initiatives.
Awesome. Lizzie, thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. As Mr. Pan had pointed out, we are really excited tonight to really talk through the accomplishments that we have done, as well as the accomplishments we're getting excited to share with you. So we really wanted to frame this section of the presentation around the work that we have begun as far as reestablishment of roles and responsibilities with communication and documentation protocols and setting timelines for priority initiatives, milestones with our project stakeholders. Each executive sponsor and project lead was excited to share all the accomplishments that they did actually accomplish last year and really walk us through key milestones to meet their annual goals and success criteria for the priority initiative. You will learn today the results from those meetings that we started earlier this school year from our project specialist, Allison Leao, which is sitting next to me, as she will provide depth to the process of those priority initiatives. She's really going to walk through a year one look back, currently what is in progress, and really the deliverables as known today for 24-25. Okay. But first, I will walk us through the status of each priority initiative and really define and identify for the board each initiative status by category. So as we launch year 2 of the strategic plan and reassess our priority initiatives, we identified key initiatives that are complete, which means that they have met their success criteria and have been launched. That initiatives that are in transition, which means they've identified as known deliverables for continuous monitoring for system improvements to be reassessed to their alignment to the strategic plan, as well as initiatives that are actually in progress, meaning they have not met all of their milestones for successful transition to successfully implement the strategic plan. As you will learn, though, tonight, these priority initiatives are in progress naturally because the timeline to produce those deliverables to meet the success criteria for identified measures of each strategic goal. We want to call out on this slide right here under Goal 1 that we have recentered our priority initiative under high-quality instruction, which we will dive in later in the presentation. So we will first talk about our priority initiatives that we are excited to tell you that we have completed, that they have met their success criteria, and their identified deliverables will be led by their community for inclusion into the systems of roles and responsibilities to drive action and accountability. We wanted to call out on this slide the Unified Communications Platform, which their success criteria was to launch our website this August. Very excited. Our priority initiatives in transition. These are initiatives that are going to be phasing out of our priority initiative project framework. The team is reevaluating the deliverables, monitoring for system improvements, driving next steps to maximize system coherence. In this slide, we wanted to call out the Strategic Plan Accountability Report, which, again, as Dr. Ashley Berkman talked about, we are excited that is now on our website. And that requirement is really to bring transparency to the successful actions in meeting the measures aligned with our strategic goals. And next, to our priority initiatives in progress. So as you will see today, we have 5 priority initiatives in progress for year 2 as of today. Each executive sponsor has identified multi-year deliverables, which include engagement with stakeholders, gathering baseline data, which will then drive next actionable steps to continue system improvements to ensure that every student has the opportunity to thrive. We do want to call out on this slide under Goal 3 that we are currently finalizing 2 new priority initiatives. As Mr. Pan had pointed out, as we add those into year 2, building equitable systems and school environments. So as mentioned earlier, we wanted to really dive into the framework of our priority initiative through continuous improvement mindset. The executive sponsor wanted to expand our priority initiative under Goal 1 to bring forward instructional leadership and math as 2 key principles to successfully implementing high-quality instruction, which is the foundation for improving student outcome. I am now pleased to pass over the mic to my colleague and our project specialist, Allison Liao, to outline in greater detail the priority initiative progress.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, today I'll be walking through the major milestones achieved over the past year. Each slide will showcase last year's accomplishments, current activities, and plans for the year ahead. I'll move through these slides pretty quickly to ensure that we have enough time for questions at the end. Please feel free to refer back to the deck for more detailed information. First, we have high-quality instruction under the umbrella of instructional leadership. The goal of this priority initiative is to develop research-based improvement cycles and framework for instructional leaders, classrooms, and curriculum. Last year, they completed the AASA Principal Supervisor Academy, and this upcoming year, they'll focus on applying what was learned and delivering summative feedback. The goal of the MTSS Priority Initiative is to develop a cohesive and holistic multi-year implementation plan for a multi-tiered system of support that integrates academic behavior and social emotional learning supports. Last year, established a whole child MTSS vision supported by guiding principles. This year, focus on building a progress monitoring system for MTSS. The goal for the K-12 Literacy Initiative is to implement instructional practices through rolling out curriculum materials and teacher supports, including aligned PD opportunities, common instructional practices, and routines. Last year, implemented Foundations of Literacy and launched the Secondary Adolescent Literacy Initiative. This upcoming year, they will continue work on the current initiatives and enhance progress monitoring. The goal of the Mathematics Initiative is to implement instructional practices through rolling out curriculum materials and teacher supports, including aligned PD opportunities, common instructional practices, and routines. Since this is new, there wasn't work done at this last year, but right now they are conducting a landscape analysis, and this year they will solidify the initiative by using the collected data and focusing on key areas of need. To round out the Goal 1 priority initiatives is STEM City of Kent. The goal with this initiative is to implement STEM and CTE-focused partnerships through the City of Kent. Last year, they expanded STEM CTE partnerships, and this year they'll focus on implementing additional apprenticeship opportunities. Moving on to Goal 2, the goal of student leadership opportunities is to develop and curate leadership opportunities that further empower students to share their ideas and perspective in decision-making. Last year, conducted a landscape analysis, and this year will create and implement student leadership policy. The goal of the priority initiative to evaluate mental health partnerships is to implement partnerships for student mental health services. Last year, they worked to develop a rubric, conducted a literature review, and built a partner map. This year, they'll focus on evaluations, training, documentation, and establishing governance structures. And this slide speaks to the Goal 3 priority initiatives, all of which have transitioned to their teams. The school improvement plan alignment has been completed. Communication protocols, documentation was created and circulated internally. The project has transitioned to their teams for further planning. And strategic plan accountability, like we mentioned a few times up here, the dashboard's done, and it's transitioned back to the team so they can maintain it. All right, transitioning to Goal 4, aligned priority initiatives. We have affinity-based opportunities. The goal of this initiative is to promote Black, Indigenous, people of color employee retention. Last year, they partnered with the Kent Educators of Color Network, defined key terms, and outlined the scope. This year, they'll focus on data collection, expanding the team, and developing a rollout plan. This brings us to my final slide. The goal of the Inclusive Classroom Initiative is to create a framework to design classrooms and schools as inclusive spaces that are accessible, conscious of social emotional learning needs, environmentally friendly, and culturally affirming. Last year, collected data about current state KSD spaces using a photo-based approach. And this year, they will launch an initial pilot program followed by a broader pilot rollout. So thank you for your time. Back to Sarah.
All right, awesome. Allison, thank you so much. So we also want to inform the board that we will be bringing you 2 more quarterly updates this year, in January and April. We will also provide updates of all of our priority initiatives in our monthly board newsletters. If the board has more questions around any of the topics that you hear tonight, please feel free to reach out to Superintendent Vela to schedule that time for a more in-depth deep dive into those initiatives through another work session. We are excited to present this information to you tonight, and we now welcome questions from the board. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to do 1 question per board member and then circle back around just so everybody has an opportunity to ask questions if that works for the board. And I see a hand from Director Clark. Would you like to kick us off?
For Dr. Berkland, the second slide on goal measures. Yeah. Okay, so the measure 1.8, I have a question on how we arrived at the target of 100% for 2028 and how that is reflected in terms of directions for students.
I can answer part of it, and then the actual direction might go somewhere else. But the intent in talking about setting the target for this is all of our students should have an opportunity throughout their high school experience to be able to take some sort of dual credit class and earn some type of college credit. So that really is that 100% target that by graduation you have some sort of college credit.
Oh, yeah, all right, but I certainly we're not trying to say we want every student to go out the door headed for a 4-year college degree. And so my question is, how do we take care of students that are more inclined towards a technical type of instruction and do look for professional certification, but it's not offered here locally?
That's a great question. So the language in the original thing is very clear. Dual credit come out of our CTE classes. So it is about our technical school relationships and students being able to earn credit for their technical schools. The other piece of the actual goal is around certifications. And many of our CTE classes offer certifications. And in the planning of that particular goal, the team felt to meet the global citizen need that kids came out of high school with credit for college, credit for a community college, credit for a vocational school, or a certification that would allow them to walk into a job knowing with the certification they need to do that particular job, and that 100% of our students could attain, we could attain that for 100% of our students.
Okay, thank you.
Director Song?
Hello. Thank you guys so much for the presentation. One of my questions was regarding the 2028 targets just throughout the throughout all of the goals. I guess how did you guys come up with those targets?
We'll say at a high level, those were set by the working groups when we created the strategic plan. So there were working groups for each of the goals, and part of the tasks of those groups were creating the measures and the targets. Some of those were based on the baseline and what was feasible to get to. Some of those were based on, I think, like Dr. Corbley said, like we're really bought into preparing students to be graduated and have these certifications or credits. So some of that varied by the teams that were creating those measures, setting those targets.
Oh, okay. So was it more, I guess, arbitrary in the fact that these were like visions and like hopeful goals, or was there an actual formula that you guys utilized to come up with some of these metrics? Like, did you look at the ratio or percentage of change over time to look at what's actually feasible year over year, or was this more of a based on what we have, we think this is a more subjective view of where we think we can head?
Yeah, I will say we weren't using any formulas or those calculations. I would say that they are aspirational in some sense and subjective, but there's some variation there from group to group.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Director Cook?
So I'm kind of looking at the same stuff that Director Song was looking at, and I'm seeing a lot of negative numbers that are going down as opposed to up. How are we planning on addressing that? So 1.3, 1.4 through 1.8 and 1.9 are all showing a downward trend on them. And even with 1.10, it's just equal. And a lot of them, as far as I can tell, do not look like they're on track to meet anywhere near where we were hoping. Are we looking at readjusting that so that we can say, you know what, that was a little bit of a lofty goal. Can we adjust that to say, this is what, given what we've seen over the last couple of years, this is what we think we realistically can hit in 2028? Because it feels like if we're looking at something like this baseline of 464 students that are showing proficiency on the World Language Assessment earned seal of biliteracy, it was at 464, we've dropped down to 366. I can't fathom a situation where we can make up that difference of an additional, 840-ish students that are passing that when we have a downward trend. Is that something that we're looking into as far as readjusting our plan?
So I can answer part of that question. I think a couple components to that, right? The first portion is that we have to report to what we've committed to within the strategic plan in terms of these measures. So in terms of adjusting the targets themselves, I don't think that's presently kind of on the table of, hey, we're going to change that target because we received a specific outcome. What it does do, though, is change our strategies, right? So what we learn from receiving this data helps us inform what future strategies we take. Because those priority initiatives and even the other work that's outside of these priority initiatives are intended to help us move towards these 4 goals, as I stated at the beginning. The actions we take and the results that we receive are things that we examine then within the context of, are they moving us closer to that? Are they the most efficient path towards that? Are they the best investments towards these things? I think that's what really this cycle of improvement then helps us inform. Where we put our resources, what are our priority initiatives for the following cycle, and then from there, making adjustments accordingly. So.
Just one follow-up on that. Have we looked at the districts around us and see how their progress is in this same space so that we can more easily compare ourselves and say, hey, these districts have a similar population, they have a similar size to us, they're dealing with the same struggles, or maybe they're not, and what are they doing to that either are causing them to succeed where we're not, or maybe sharing from our end where we're succeeding and they're not. Is that communication happening?
Hi, Director Cook. We're not having regular conversations, but we are looking at the data, and we are learning from our iReady partners what it looks like from across the region, because there's a lot of districts in the region across the country. And so we get national data, we get Washington state data, and then we get Kent-specific data. While we are not proud of the data declining, we are not alone in our region. There is actually a study that they just published out of iReady around the impact of COVID. We all know that there are great declines in foundational skills that our students missed while they were in distance learning. And so we now are spending time really doing deeper data analysis to see what foundational skills did third graders miss in math, number, and operations, and how is that showing up in middle school. And so our leadership team is really focusing on what strategies and professional development that we really need to narrow in on to address those gaps. So not to say that we're proud of it, but we are absolutely not alone in the region and across the country.
Yeah, I think that sounds really good. I think it'd be good to be able to compare the two so that we can show the community around us, hey, we're not the only ones. And just saying it is one thing, but to actually provide that data to them and say, here's what we're doing, here's how we're doing with those things, and then how it's compared. The other piece that I'm kind of curious about is.
Could we actually move on to the other questions of the directors, and we'll get back to you with
Yeah, that's
enough
fine.
time? Thank
I'll
you.
just write it down.
Perfect. I did have a question, and maybe it's just I'm not understanding what's being presented, but when we started looking from the kind of the arrows that show last year, what's in progress and moving forward, a lot of it is we're going to identify, we're going to evaluate, we're going to monitor. But I guess what I'm not seeing, and maybe this is a bigger conversation, is, so what does that get you? Like, what have we done? Is it working? Is it not? And so that's that. The so what is not represented there, and maybe that's not the place where it was supposed to be. And but could you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things, right? In the life cycle of many of these priority initiatives, we can only report out the specific accomplishments that have been accomplished. And so for the ones that are kind of in progress, if you look at the intended plan, many of them, that first year is really almost a scoping type activity, right? Accomplishing landscape analysis, pulling together a group to have conversation to develop to develop a plan, right? To produce a plan. So I would kind of focus on like what is the intent of what is accomplished in that cycle. The accomplishment might be developing a set of relationships so that future work can happen, developing a team that can produce a certain thing, or accomplishing a rubric so that it can be utilized for something else. So a tangible example would be something like the evaluating mental health partnerships, right? The early, and you heard about this in past presentations, the early component work was even settling upon what do we mean when we talk about certain definitions, right? So having established common criteria, common definitions, then allows for a development of evaluation rubrics so that we can complete this activity. So for 24-25, then you will see under that one that there is a evaluation to be completed, but that would be impossible without having established and developed a rubric for that. So yes, many of the early accomplishments are more in the completed landscape analysis, gather present state.
Makes sense. I guess I would just comment on that I think the board eagerly awaits seeing actual results and then where it goes from there. I know that there's a lot being done here. I mean, this is dense. I think it would be, another year for evaluating, and then if we could keep pushing it out, then we would like to see where, good or bad, what happens with it, and then what course we take from there.
Yeah, if I may very quickly just add, it's a great question in that what comes to mind is what's the impact then of the action steps taken and in systems, as we talked about high level, you do have to course correct when you have the information or the data that tells you need to. So Director Cook, to your question about the data, it's at some point we can't keep doing the same thing from a systems perspective if we see that as having a positive impact on kids, as an example.
Yep.
The same thing is true in all of the goal areas, right? But yes, it is definitely. And then the other piece I'll share is that, as I shared at the end of last year, the 23-24 school year was actually our first year of the strategic plan. And so now we have that, quote, baseline data to inform KPIs, where before how we set those KPIs was using, as you heard from Dr. Burke, that 21-22 data and 22-23 data was used to establish and just get us going. To Director Song's question, it's like, so how'd you do that? How'd you come up with those? So it's at the beginning stages, but great questions.
Thank you. Did you have another question?
Well, interesting, I'm still stuck on it, evaluating mental health partnerships. The concern I have here is, clearly, we've made some significant investments in marching down that, but it's also overly obvious that the demand is beyond the capacity. And so my concern is, I believe it's Hazelwood was, and that's primarily a
Hazelwood.
Zoom thing, but it was done by grant, and so we have buildings that actually literally haven't had access. So I guess I'm asking, how are we evaluating those buildings that currently don't have access? And then is there a significant difference between the types of contacts that we have, for instance, on site with Kent Youth and Family Services actually being there versus the Zoom contact?
Asking the question. We have a number of partnerships with mental health agencies. Hazel Health is our only, I would say, virtual access offering to students in both mental health and physical health supports, and all students in this district have access to Hazel Health. It's a matter of whether they're accessing it during the school day because the commitment from the building leader includes services during the day, or if kids are accessing it from home. So the mental health is available 7 to 7, and the physical health is available from 7 to 5. We also have a partnership with Kent Youth and Family Services for mental health and substance use disorder. We have just expanded that support courtesy of local partners investing in that work and our students being a recipient of that. We also have Valley Cities as a provider, and these providers are in person, but they can also do virtual supports. And so we have a number of services available to students, but I will again confirm that the capacity, there is a capacity to meet the demand problem, as you know. And so we're striving to couple those services with mentoring, right, and trying to make sure the kids have that one champion adult. And we're looking at other strategies for supporting kids' unique, complex needs.
Thank you.
Director Song?
Hi. So my next question is on inclusive classrooms. Looking at the progress and the goals for 24-25 with the piloting of these interventions and strategies, I guess my biggest question is when it comes to paraeducators, classroom aides for students who are kind of on that tier 3 or who have IEP specifically designated one-to-one staffing due to social, emotional, or behavioral concerns. What are we doing as a district to identify training and specialized supports for those staff? Because at this time, there is no statewide standard for what kind of training paraprofessionals undergo.
Thank you, Director Song. Appreciate the question. So our team that's working on inclusive spaces is actually really looking at the physical space and making sure it's a space that feels welcoming, inviting, both for the space of the physical space of like color, of kind of where material and items are at as far as in the classroom. The team has actually been working on a project this spring called Photo Voice, and we're really excited. Really what that project was about is really allowing students and staff to take pictures of spaces that make them feel welcome, but also take pictures of spaces that maybe that doesn't create that welcome environment for them. So I'm sorry that it sounds like maybe you were hoping for this initiative to provide kind of some additional supports for our IEP students and pairs in that classroom. Is that correct?
Yeah, my question was geared towards what does the training and supports look like for the staff members working with those students?
Okay. Yeah, and unfortunately, I just don't believe that priority initiative is actually addressing that exact need. Okay, yeah, so, but Director Song, I'm a part of that committee working alongside Simone Hamilton. So I will make sure that I follow up with the team and get back to Superintendent Vela to make sure that we respond to your question.
Thank you.
Director Cook?
So back onto what I was talking about before, what are we doing to show what change we expect to be realistic? I feel like it's hard to, as a board, for us to make a determination of success, right, or a failure, and that we are making the proper changes addressing each of those, right? If we're seeing success, how can we lean into that? And then if we're seeing a failure of some kind, how can we pull back the measures that we've put in place and maybe try something a little different, or the measures maybe we weren't forceful enough with those measures, or we didn't push them hard enough to make sure that we were going in that direction. So I don't know if there's a way for us to maybe show that per year, like what we're expecting from now till the end of next year, and then what we're seeing the year after that. And if we don't, how are we going to adjust? Because if we just say that we want to make it to this 1,200 number, or we're trying to meet 100% and we're only at 65 and we're nowhere near, it feels like we're just kind of saying, oh, well, we're going to try. We expect a lot of our students to have SMART goals because we want something that's measurable so that we can go in and look at it and say, yeah, that's what we were trying to do and we accomplished it. Or no, we didn't quite accomplish it, but here's how we're going to address that and what the different things that we've done. And so that we have that data to say, here are the things we tried and here's the things we didn't. Maybe we'll try some of the ones that we didn't and see if those work a little bit better.
I'll tackle a little bit of this, and I prospectively might need more information for later. But as Dr. Birkeland and Lizzie Barker noted, what you're seeing is just these slides, right? But what's actually on the website right now, that dashboard provides additional information beyond just what you see here. Some of that information is kind of indicated by within expectations by year, right? So some of these are more conducive to that because there are kind of a graduated expectation of where we expect these measures to land kind of on a year-by-year basis. Others are not, right? Others are, this is the standard which we hope to achieve, right? By the conclusion, if we achieve that earlier, that's great. So you'll see both types of those data, and I think that's why there's a little nuance to that. Because some things, if tomorrow we can do this thing, then we expect to see that in place. Other things, we are expecting more of a gradual incrementation towards those.
If I could also add, Director Cook, that I would believe it was last week we heard our presentations on school improvement plans. Those school improvement plans are actually linked to the data that key performance indicators that you see here. Those are the places we all actually want to see the evidence of impact, if you will. From a systems perspective, to your question about adjusting, is looking at that kind of data. Example, I-rated data by school, by grade level, by student would be data that we would be monitoring to make that just-in-time adjustments or pivots. From a systems perspective, how are we providing our supports, our PD supports? Are there best practices that we also want to make sure we double down our efforts? Or are there best practices that we are not monitoring in a way that we're actually monitoring for fidelity of implementation? For example, if you're not getting the results or you're not implementing it the right way, that's also an indication to assistance. So all of those pieces are what the team is actually looking at as well as we look at making those pivots, I'll call them.
Kind of building off of the something that Director Cook brought up of where are we getting our data from and who are we partnering with. I'm interested in the affinity partnership with Kent Educator of Color, and I think that we actually have quite a bit of representation, so I'd like to call them out here and say welcome to the meeting tonight. I'd like to hear a little bit about what that partnership looks like, goals, what's happening so far, what are you looking forward to doing? If you could talk a little bit about that, that'd be great.
Hello.
So, hi, my name is Tamara Lucretia. I go by Miss T, if anybody knows me. I'm supposed to look out for you, apparently. Yeah. I had the microphone. You guys gave it to me. That's your fault. Yeah, so we were approached by HR asking us about affinity spaces last year. And because we have been doing affinity spaces as a collective within our organization. And I want to shout out that our organization is run by a bunch of leaders. We are leader-full. We are not hierarchy. And so when I was asked to come here and speak, I have to acknowledge the fact that I'm not speaking for myself, but I'm speaking for everyone else, but that didn't feel right to me because that's not how we navigate spaces. And so as a collective, we have a fair representation of our network of ourselves. And I just want to make sure that that is very clear. So as going back, we were approached to do affinity spaces because, let's face it, we're the experts. We are the ones that are the original bridge builders. We understand that there has to be safe spaces and spaces where people feel comfortable being their authentic selves. We also know that we identify there's a lot of problems, but we also know that there are solutions. And when you're in spaces where you identify who you are and people acknowledge and let you speak, and you could put your heads together and brainstorm, it doesn't have to be a problem, it could be a solution. And I have to give a shout out to Mr. Hunter and Irene for giving us a platform to speak our truths and taking a risk on the gems that are in KSD. That is super important. And at the end of the day, when we do these spaces, it's about making sure that people feel holistic. And when you leave, you feel a sense of pride. You don't feel defeated. We understand that, some of the systems that we are going up against aren't necessarily representative of who we are as a collective, but that doesn't mean that it can't be. We have to just imagine and reimagine. But that takes bravery, trust, cultivating relationships, respect, dignity. And when you have those in place, when you disagree, it's fine because you know it's coming from a place of love and respect. And we can move forward. That is what the Kin Educators of Color do. That's how we show up. And yeah, we could ask hard questions because they need to be asked. So when we're in these spaces where we feel safe and emboldened to speak our truths, we move forward. And this is something that this district, if we're really doing our due diligence and trying to hit these markers, we have to save space. We have to really open up and make sure that people understand that their authentic self can come through and that everybody has a voice. And we need to listen, because if we can't do that with ourselves as adults, you're not doing that for the kids. The kids have their own voice, and we need to pass that along, and we need to share that, and we need to listen. When people can share their truth, you can get through anything. You probably didn't answer the question that you wanted. But you know, as me goes,
I
you know,
do
I don't
appreciate it.
plan.
No, I think it's good to talk a little bit about what the mission is of the Kin Educator of Color Network. And by the way, that's a really long sentence to say. Do you use an acronym?
KEOCN.
Okay, that's really long
Yeah.
too. Okay.
A little bit easier. Yeah.
Yeah. You, Bob, I'll take that. I appreciate hearing the mission because that does talk about, two groups really coming together to really one group, right? And how are we going to be here for kids? And love hearing that over and over. I would kind of very specifically would love to hear, is there certain goals that have been established yet? Or is that still kind of in process of what that partnership looks like?
Okay. So I think this is a great time to actually share our mission and vision, which we actually revisited because we had set goals for ourselves. And then we took time to pause and reflect to see where we were in that work.
Yeah.
And as Ms. T said, I'm Andrea Victoria. I'm a language arts teacher at Mill Creek Middle School. And so we paused and reflected, and we realized that we actually, through our leaderful organization, we actually met a lot of the goals that we had established for ourselves. And so I'm going to pass the mic over to Denise to share our new updated vision for the Kent Educators of Color Network.
Yep. Hi, I'm Denise Renteria. Wow. I'm a community member now, but I did work with KSD for 11 years in the dual language program. I'm very happy to be here. The Kent Educators of Color Network began in 2018-19 on a vision, and we're excited that we've accomplished so much of what we started and can continue in partnership with KSD is so exciting. So our new vision statement is we're a group of educators of color, LGBTQIA plus educators, and proven allies, accomplices, and co-conspirators, establishing a network of support for ourselves and for the success of all students, especially students of color and our LGBTQIA students. And then Andrea will read our mission. And then I do have some, because we do have the CARE grant, and this is the third year of our CARE grant, I do have some responses from our third year cohorts that address specifically that they wanted the district to know about affinity spaces. I think that would really be helpful.
Thank you.
Right. And so our new mission is our purpose is to support and advance the fellowship, networking, and mentoring of all educators of color, LGBTQIA plus educators, advancing opportunities for educators of all intersectionalities to better advocate for and serve the needs of the students and families in our communities, to amplify the recruiting and retention of educators of color and LGBTQIA plus educators in the Kent School District. And so we started from this space where we centered the voices and the experiences of BIPOC educators, but then we're now in this space where we are more inclusive. We're acknowledging that our LGBTQIA plus educators and students also need our support, also need spaces where they feel safe, seen, and heard, and for our students as well. And so we're grateful for the opportunity to partner with the district through Damon and Irene, and for sort of the approach to sort of like take things slow to go fast, because this work is so important, it can't be rushed. And so, I mean, we probably can't check off all the check boxes in a way that might please people, but it's what's right for the people that matter the most in this situation. And that's our educators of color, our LGBTQIA plus educators, our students and community members and allies and accomplices and co-conspirators. This work is really hard, and we owe it to them to do it slowly and to do right by them. Okay.
I also want to shout out Mr. Damon Hunter and Irene Aguilar because, shout out. I think initially I began with Irene 3 years ago, probably talking with PSESD about centering educators of color and their needs, retention, and recruitment. And I had no idea as a teacher back then that these kind of high-level conversations were even happening at districts all in this roadmap area. So that was really encouraging to me as a person that worked with Kent School District and as a community member of Kent School District. And based off of that, I would say it's been 3 years in the making, because these conversations take time and understanding. And that's something you just can't, it's not a quantitative measure. And I really applaud both of these people here in HR for taking time to get to know us as a network, to lean in, to hear our concerns, and to spend the year hashing out what is this really. So I do want to applaud that. And as also a founding member of our CARE Grant Committee, shout out, this is our third year. We asked them, what would you tell district leadership about why professional development, because we consider it professional development when we bring community together. What would you tell district leadership about why professional development like this is important? And we received 30 responses from our own participants from our CARE grant. First one says it tackles the white supremacy culture. This allows BIPOC educators to network and find a voice within each other. We are alone at our schools, exclamation points. We are exhausted from the work we do as teachers and other educator capacities. By meeting, we know we are being looked after and that we have professionals who care and want us to advance. It's important to be acknowledged and recognized our different backgrounds and our efforts. Preparing ourselves for education is preparing our students for their education. I believe teachers and paras deserve to get any training as it takes a tribe to raise and nurture our students. It is helpful for better understanding of each other, their culture, which is helpful to me to be a good teacher. It's essential towards having people who care, especially in shaping the future of the students and the schools. It is important for we all find the space to take care of ourselves and advance ourselves for us to better serving the diverse student needs. It's overwhelming to do the work alone and have to fit into the current culture. We need to retain more educators of color for our ever-changing demographics. This is more important than required DEI trainings for BIPOC people who have been trained in our lived experiences about the systemic problems. We need avenues for us to build community. If we feel alone, which many of us do, our retention will be unsustainable. The KEOCN is the only force that is finding solutions to this problem at the moment. Excuse me.
Maybe a couple more comments, because you know this takes time and this seems like the worst non sequitur thing to say, but we actually do need to also leave time today for our MLE presentation. We're about 6 minutes over.
Yep. So I guess the point is an investment of our educators of color is an investment of our students. For us, it's not an option. It's not an option. It's one and the same. And so when we give our educators of color opportunity to feel their brilliance, I will say, to fulfill their leadership potential, which currently is not happening, and it is felt that it is not happening. It makes a difference. It makes a difference for our district. It makes a difference for our students. It makes a difference for our schools and our communities. It just makes a big difference. Diversity is strength, and I really applaud the effort of the district taking on the initiative for affinity spaces.
And then can I add one more thing? And as I was looking through all the slides, like one thing really stood out to me, and it made me ask myself, just the whole concept of what's good for students. We always ask ourselves that, right? But as far as educators of color go, what's good for the students is also good for adults. If we center the recruitment through retaining educators of color, I wonder what would happen with meeting those benchmarks that we've set for our district. When students are in spaces and in classrooms with teachers that look like them, have the same lived experiences as them, as an adult, being in that space, I can actually breathe because I know I don't have to put on another hat or wear another mask. I can just be myself, and my identity is valued and honored. I don't have to try as hard. And that's what I want for all of us here, is to have a space where we feel safe to be our whole selves. We don't have to hide any part of us. So then we can do the work that we need to do for ourselves, for our communities and our students. What would happen if we actually centered those people who are doing the work here? I bet you we'd make those benchmarks. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I love ending on what would happen if. It's a great place to be, and love the partnership. Thank you very much for the very full answer. And I feel like that there's also a lot of work being done here and an opportunity to find out even more as this work continues. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. If I may, just very quickly, want to thank our Educators of Color Network, Ms. Aguilar, Mr. Hunter, and the work they've been doing, as Denise mentioned, didn't start yesterday. It started, I would say, over 3 years ago when the NEA grant came into play. I couldn't think of a better way to end our data and strategic plan presentation today. So again, thank you, and I am going to turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Before we move on to the next section, just a lot of work has gone into this. I know with every number, there is a multitude of people and meetings and data and work that goes into it that I know that we don't even know how much that is, but please know that is appreciated, as is your time here today to answer questions about it and continuing that on. We do move on to our next section, which is 2.02, multilingual education programs, and I call upon Superintendent Vela.
Thank you. And before I introduce our leaders for that, I wanted to take a quick pause and go ahead and allow for anybody that needs to leave or transition. We will transition into our next presentation before I turn it back over to folks. So I wanted to do that if I can. President Margell.
Yep, absolutely. Yes, I remember this, yep.
And I had a research about our BIPOC leaders here in K-12. You're interested in learning about their voices. That's my dissertation. So I have all the data.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Okay, and if I may, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Kim to get us started with introductions of our team and our next presentation. Dr. Kim.
Well, I am very, very proud to introduce Cynthia Green, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, and new to Kent School District this year, and very lucky to have Gamiel Diaz as our Assistant Director of Multilingual Education and World Language. Today, they are going to share an exciting overview of the intentional targeted work that we are doing in KSD on behalf of a high percentage, and you're going to see some numbers this evening, of students who qualify for multilingual education services. So with that, passing it on, I believe, to Cynthia.
Good evening, President Margell, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, Ms. Curry, Ms. Santello, and Team KSD. We are delighted to be here this evening and proud to speak about our students and staff representing the Multilingual Ed program. I'm Cynthia, this is Gami. We're going to start by celebrating and points of pride with our program. In Kent School District, we have a really high number of teachers that have sought their ELL endorsement. The ratio of teachers to students that are endorsed across the district as a system is about one teacher to every 30 students. So that's extraordinary, seeking that additional endorsement and credentials. Tonight, we're going to talk to you about the Transitional Bilingual Instructional Program grant and the multilingual program itself. We're going to focus on our students. Multilingual learners are basic education students first. The MLE teachers that provide English language development services, and then teachers, classroom teachers that provide support to language and accessible content. Finally, we're going to cover the funding that supports a robust MLE program and our program model and services.
Good evening, President Margell, members of the board, each member, Superintendent Vela, Ms. Curry, Ms. Santello, and our KSD colleagues. On this slide is our MLE mission and vision that was developed starting in 2022. You have the mission and vision with you, but I really wanted to highlight some pieces of the mission: language, culture, and empowered. And in the vision, sustainable systems and asset based. Here is our MLE team this year. We have 2 program specialists, 4 MLE instructional coaches, with one of them also supporting our dual language programming.
As we move through the presentation, each of the blue slides outlines the sections of the Transitional Bilingual Instructional Program grant. And so we're going to talk about the program demographics. The Transitional Bilingual Instructional Program grant is state funding that we receive to operate our program. The demographics for our program, we want to highlight the diversity of languages spoken by our students, over 132 languages, and over 707,448 students qualify for services for English language development as part of the program. So the data here shows the number of students in the program by grade, and then breaks down 1,021 MLE students are also provided inclusive education services. 526 of our students participate in the dual language program. 51 students participate in high CAP services as well. 71 attend Running Start, and 4,501 qualify as low income as well. This slide highlights the gender and ethnicity data of students participating in the program, and the area in yellow highlights that this group identifies under the category of white. We wanted to name the number of students receiving multilingual ed services per school, looking at our middle schools, high schools, and academy programs, and then noting schools that have over 51% of their population as multilingual ed students. This slide highlights the number or the percentage of multilingual education students over the years, and our program is growing substantially. For the 23-24 school year, 29% of our students in KSD students are students that are acquiring English as an additional language. This slide highlights and explains how we fund our program. So basic ed, as you remember in the beginning, all students are basic ed students first. Basic ed supports and funds the dual language program, and all of our classroom teachers, K-12, which are teachers of record. The Transitional Bilingual Instructional Program, referred to as TBIP, is state supplemental funding. So this provides our staffing multilingual education teachers that are ELL endorsed that provide English language development services. And then finally, Title III funding is supplemental funding, and it's federal funding, and it provides very specific allowable categories, including professional development, supplemental English language development curriculum, the district staffing MLE program specialists and coaches, family engagement, and then before and after school activities for MLE students are allowable as well. This slide highlights between the TBIP state funding and the Title III federal funding what's allowable, and remembering that all students are basic ed students first, and that the staffing and the activities that we provide all supplement that basic ed piece first, so how we build and fund a robust MLE program. All right, this looks at our staffing, how it's funded with the TBIP grant, and the growth of the program over the years, the number of students, the number of certificated staff, that's MLE teachers, and the number of MLE paraeducators that support students in the program. So this year, the TBIP grant is $13,184,737, and then local funding matches or supports at $8,375,030. And we have about 94.4 MLE teachers. Remember, those teachers are all endorsed with an ELL endorsement providing English language development services, and 80 MLE paraeducators that work under the guidance of those certificated and endorsed MLE teachers.
Now I'm going to talk about program model and services that fall under the pieces of the TBIP grant. And as I talk about program model and services, as we know, students that receive MLE services are basic ed students first. But specific to TBIP funding, there are two components that the state requires that to fulfill under the TBIP grant. And these components are called English Language Development, or ELD, services. There are two pieces to ELD. The one on the left, the orange peach color one, is what we call designated ELD, and the second component is called integrated ELD, or also known as accessible content. The three program models that KSD offers to support these ELD services are dual language, supportive mainstream, and content-based sheltered instruction, or CBI. The two components of TBIP, as I mentioned, it's designated ELD and integrated ELD. On the left, you can see what designated ELD looks like. The purpose of designated ELD is to develop students' English proficiency using the state-adopted ELD standard, which we are a WIDA, a state that uses the WIDA standards. ELD should be explicit and systematic to build on the students' language strengths. On the visual, you can see the language and content piece together. Research shows that it's always best to provide instruction in context for multilingual learners, which, although designated ELD is focused on language, content should always be connected to that support. On the right, the second component is the integrated ELD, or accessible content. The purpose of that is to provide meaningful access to grade-level academic content instruction. Instruction is sheltered to help students learn the language and content. As you can see, language and content are together again. However, in this part of the service, content is the emphasis. But once again, language and content must be together to provide that keyword, meaningful access to grade level content. Under TBIP, planning, teaching, and staffing, TBIP is what supports these three pieces of the two components. ELD supports, so those two pieces can be provided under TBIP by an MLE teacher that holds that ELL endorsement, a classroom teacher with some collaboration with an MLE teacher, or a paraeducator who is trained and supervised under the MLE teacher. The first program model that KSD we offer is our dual language program. On the left, you will see all of our schools that offer dual language. A celebratory piece of dual language is that we are now K-12, and the first cohort that started in kindergarten is now in 12th grade. So that's a huge milestone and celebration of the dual language program. At KSD, we offer a 50-50 two-way program. 50-50, meaning that 50% of the instruction is done in Spanish and 50% of the instruction is done in English. The term two-way refers to two-way immersion. This means that the goal is that in the classroom, there is a balance of multilingual Spanish speakers and English speakers. And in this model, students learn the content, the language, and the literacy in two languages. The learning is not repeated in our 50-50 model, but instead is bridged to accelerate the transfer across the languages. The program goals include bilingualism and biliteracy, high academic achievement, and sociocultural competence. The second program model that KSD offers under TBIP is supportive mainstream. This is offered K-12 at all our schools. Once again, on the left, the purpose of our ELD supports are that designated and integrated ELD. On that first row, you will see the visual that shows that multilingual learners are included in the general education classroom. Remember, they're basic ed students first. And the services, the additional services under TBIP, are provided by the classroom teacher with support through co-planning and or co-teaching from an MLE teacher and or paraeducator. In the middle, you'll see the visual where individual or small group supports may be offered within the classroom to provide that designated ELD service. And then at the secondary level, students may receive ELD services during a specific support class that takes place of an elective of the 6-period day. This is most effective for students in their first few years of schooling when they're in the emergent stages to have a sheltered setting, but long-term is not recommended. And once again, students are basic ed students first, and TBIP provides the additional supports for planning, teaching, and staffing of the supportive mainstream model. The third model that we offer at KSD is content-based sheltered instruction, or CBI. CBI is used in classes where they are comprised of predominantly multilingual learners, explicit language development, or ELD, and grade level academic content are delivered specifically by that trained ELD teacher, the teacher that holds that ELL endorsement. Here at KSD, our CBI courses are offered through the integrated ELA, so it's ELA and ELD courses.
Part of the components for the Transitional Bilingual Instructional Program grant is program evaluation and improvement. I want to call attention to this data pool is from 22-23 data from CEDARS directly from OSPI and answers questions within the grant. These are areas that we monitor for effectiveness and evaluation of the program and how we action plan, and you can see your total number of students and the percentage total for KSD, and then how it compares to the state. So the areas that we pay attention to are the total number and percent of multilingual students in the district, MLs exiting TBIP services, former exited MLs meeting standard on the ELA assessment and math assessment 2 years after exiting the program. And then we watch students that have been in the program and have not exited after 5 years, and students that duly qualify for special education services. Last year, Kent School District worked with the Center of Applied Linguistics to do a needs assessment and evaluate our multilingual ed program. And they came back with these areas of focus for us, looking at cultural awareness and leveraging our assets in diverse community. Really being clear about processes and protocols for students around identification and services. Supporting really balanced support between content and ELD. Centering high expectations for all students. How we manage our data, we're going to talk about that momentarily. How we manage our data, how we have data that informs progress monitoring, as well as how we provide in-time adjustments to instruction to support students. How we support students that are new to the country, our newcomers that are newly acquiring language. The support that we provide teachers with a robust professional development plan, staffing equity, and support of long-term multilingual students.
The other component of the TBIP grant is outlining a professional learning plan. The three big areas or buckets of work to support these pieces under the TBIP grant are through, as we talked about, data. So this year we are using a platform called Elevation. Elevation offers a clear data dashboard of WIDA, that ELD standards, of students' levels to all KSD staff, not just MLE teachers. And the Elevation platform includes strategy. So this is one area that we will focus on, is getting clear on what is the data, how to use the data, and how to support our multilingual learners. The second bucket of work is continuing to deepen our knowledge and use of our state-adopted ELD standard, which is WIDA. And then lastly, as we know under TBIP, planning, teaching, and collaboration can be done within the MLE teacher, a content area teacher, and a paraeducator. So we're investing in collaborative teaching practices, that umbrella that can include co-teaching, co-planning, and co-assessment, so that we strengthen our students, because they are basic ed students first, and collaborative teaching practices is the third focus of our PD plan. The TBIP grant expects compliance, and we're going to discuss system coherence work that keeps us on track with meeting the needs of our diverse programs. As mentioned, we will be using our Elevation platform. Elevation offers transparent WIDA, which is our ELD standards, transparent WIDA data, language data for all staff, as mentioned before, not just MLE teachers. So all KSD staff have access from our paraeducators, building leaders, and our teachers. Elevation also offers individual student support profiles. So as we are required to track and monitor and progress monitor our students, this platform allows our educators to have a system to do so. Elevation also offers PD plans and strategies. There are research-based strategies, over 100, and there's about 108 strategies, and PD modules to support best practices for multilingual learners. And lastly, Elevation supports the compliance piece under the TBIP grant. There is the ability to progress monitor our students that have exited the program that we are still required to monitor for 2 years after they have exited. And lastly, they support the parent notification letters, which are required under our service model. On this slide is a big bird's eye view of what the Elevation platform allows. So on the data dashboard here, there are numbers of active MLE students for educators to access. So each access will be given depending on which building they are at. And this clear data dashboard with numbers, there's also information around composite level scores of students that receive MLE services, and then domain-specific scores with listening, speaking, reading, and writing. So all the data is now centralized for not only the MLE teacher to access at their fingertips, but all staff. With this data supports the monitoring of our state WSIF metrics with who's regressing, who's progressing, who's exceeding. It's analyzable by school, grade, teacher, and even periods with our secondary schools. And this will support us making sure that we're tracking the WSIF metrics. As mentioned before, this platform allows us to really look at student profiles. So in this tool, we can provide individualized MLE support plans, and our MLE educators can log their goals, student goals, and monitor through forms based on their WIDA language proficiency, along with the different domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. As well as a bank of those research-based strategies. There are over 108 ELD activities that are ready-made with that are accessible. These activities are integrated. ELD is equipped, and they're accessible to all educators, not just MLE teachers, with forms and worksheets translatable in various languages, not just English. In addition, there are professional learning modules, such as how to support newcomers, developing academic language, and other topics that this platform provides to really provide scalable, multilingual professional learning opportunities for all KSD educators across our system that are supporting our multilingual students to really empower that asset-based lens and that responsibility that we all have to serve our multilingual students as they are basic ed students first. There are also exited monitoring forms. So one of the pieces are, again, we are required to monitor our students that have exited for 2 years. And this platform will fulfill that requirement by having our monitoring forms, and we will be able to analyze the data as we're monitoring as well. And lastly, this is a visual of the parent notification letters that are required by the state and required by our TBIP grant. Elevation provides this parent notification, and it's much more streamlined. It will be saving a lot of time on our end, and will keep the focus on student impact, and they are available on all that list of different languages. Okay, and now I will open it up for questions.
Do you want to? Director Clark?
I'm sorry. Forgive me. My wife was a school psychologist, and so I learned a lot of lessons in terms of how they evaluate within that program. And the one that was always disconcerting is, what do you do with someone that does not communicate verbally? And the reason I bring that up is one of the problems I have is a number of groups of students that we receive are actually coming from pretty terrifying circumstances. And so the question becomes getting them assessed and into the right program. So I'm just going to throw out a group just for the sake of examination, because I was caught off guard visiting one of the schools, and they had an unusual population in terms of numbers of students from the old country of Burma. Now, very clearly, there's been a lot of trauma within that particular country, but as a language group, they are they're unlike some of the other groups that we have gotten. And so I guess my question is the evaluation process within an elementary receiving students where you're the regular system would have trouble identifying, and so your group is stepping in and trying to measure. And how do you approach a group like that?
Just to clarify the question, I think, Dr. Clark, it's, you mentioned the example of students potentially from Burma, and for the question for the team, it would be any student coming in that potentially may need MLE services, what would that process look like? And when does that happen throughout the year? So I'll turn that over to Cami.
Thank you. I appreciate that question, as we definitely serve a diverse population here, and making sure that we do best by serving all of our students and where they come from. So I really appreciate that. The process for a student to be screened under TBIP and under MLE services, once the home language survey, once there is a language other than English marked on one of those questions, that will initiate the process of a student to be screened. As said, we are a WIDA state, so we use the WIDA screener, which is a condensed version of the annual assessment. The WIDA screener is then presented to the student, and the purpose of the WIDA screener is to go through each domain, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and meaningful attempts do have to be made for the students to answer. And so there are situations where students may be nonverbal or other external factors or reasons why they might not answer. And so we do our best to get them to respond as best as we can. And then based on that, we'll identify their levels. We have had incidents where students are screened and may not have performed based on what the screener and the standardized test is asking. But one beautiful piece of the Elevation platform is that our MLE teachers and departments, although this was a screener and landed them in a certain level based on a standardized score, we can accurately progress monitor in meaningful ways in the classroom and in their settings, so that we don't just rely on that standardized score, and that we prepare them for the annual assessment as well.
Thank you.
Director Song.
Yeah, my question is kind of blending the goals from the MLE program and the the goals for the inclusive ed programs. What do multilingual students and learners look like in terms of supports if they're also receiving IEPs or if they have disabilities?
Thank you. That's a thoughtful question. So the process to screen a student, that there's a critical process. We want to make sure that we're identifying students that we don't want to identify a language alone. And so there's a really thoughtful process as we go through. So of course, with MLE services, we're providing that English language development support for the student. And then we're following the individualized education plan that is required for the student. So making sure on the MLE side that we're providing support so that students have language access to and content access, and then following everything within the IEP. So there are multiple adults that work between the programs to support those students. And that student, again, for both programs they're participating in, is a basic ed student first.
Okay, can I ask a follow-up on that? Sure. This is just out of curiosity. Is there anything on like a national scale in terms of curriculum and development that specifically caters to that population for students who might need adaptive or supported forms of education or accommodations due to whether it's physical or developmental disabilities, and they're also non-native English speakers? Are you guys aware of any curriculum or services that currently exist?
And I might tag IE in for help as well around the table, but I'm not aware of a specific curriculum that would address that need. Rather, the instructional support for how we provide access to content for that student. And that may look a number of ways. So that piece about PD around pedagogy, how we're supporting teachers, how we have those additional endorsements to support the student. The curriculum isn't always, there's not one package curriculum that can support all needs, but rather how we take the resources we have and put them together to best meet and serve that student, meeting the student where they are and leveraging adult expertise across programs.
I will share also, Director Song, that one of the things that teams are very cognizant of is making sure that our MLE students aren't disproportionately being identified due to a language they speak at home versus a identified disability. The other piece is sometimes being able to speak the language. That's why when we talked about Goal 4 of our Educators of Color Network, it's important to continue to hire staff, in particular pairs, that will help us with that. Because that's the kind of thing that will help us in identifying if there is a potential disability or something that we might need to be aware of in their language, as opposed to simply saying because they don't speak English that they actually might qualify, because that actually does happen, unfortunately. But our team does a really good job about that. So.
Yeah, no, I was just curious just because I sit on a dissertation committee, and this is just sounding like a really great research opportunity for development of a curriculum like that if it doesn't exist.
Yep.
I think for added knowledge, one of our priority initiatives is around serving the whole child through multi-tiered systems of support. And in a couple of years, 2 years, the state is going to require that school districts have a comprehensive common MTSS progress monitoring system as part of the special education evaluation process. And that is to decrease the number of students of color that are disproportionately identified for special education services. So that being said, the work that our team is doing collaboratively under the leadership of Deborah Willisey, who is leading the work around MTSS, is looking at how we're progress monitoring English language development, how we're progress monitoring other services or learning disabilities that students qualify for. And that really addresses how we're looking at the whole child, which I think is really aligned to the question that you're asking when a child is twice exceptional.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Could I add one piece, which is why the third piece of our professional learning plan is around collaborative practices. And as mentioned, there's no one-stop shop curriculum yet, maybe, right, that has all these components, but the collaborative teacher, educator, professional collaboration through whether it's co-planning, co-teaching, co-assessment, co-looking at data is what we're investing in our professional learning plan, and we are excited to see how to expand that with the other intersections of multilingualism and students that receive have IEPs as well.
Thank you, guys.
Director Cook?
I just had a question on the dual language program. It looks like we've got 3 elementary schools, a middle school, and a high school that provide that as an option. Is there any plan to expand this program? Is it just going to stay where it currently is? And I'll have a follow-up question after that one.
Thanks, Gami. Thank you for your question, Director Cook. The state superintendent has a charge by 2030, I believe, to expand our program. In KSD, the program has been in place for 13 years now. Gami mentioned that our first group, our first cohort, are seniors this year. So there's many, as we work with colleagues among the state, some are starting and working on their programs. Kent has implemented a program and into secondary. And so I think that there is opportunity to look at where we are and where we're going with the program and what other languages. Some of our surrounding districts have other languages, so the intent is to ensure strong programs with a lens toward leading and growing, but what that timeline looks like and how we fund our programs. So we talked about basic ed today. We talked about TBIF and Title III, kind of looking at all those pieces together and ensuring that as we build forward, we're building for sustainability and retaining students in the program. So yes.
I love that. I think it's really great. I'd love to see this expanded as much as we possibly can. What are we doing to address the equity issue here? As far as I understand it, there isn't a bus that takes kids from wherever their normal school is, like we do with our high cap students or our special education students. We don't have the same sort of thing in this space, as far as I understand it. Is that something we're looking at as a possibility so that those families that would encourage their students to attend these types of schools would be able to possibly do so? And I guess the logistics of that, is there anything being done to look into that?
There's been a fair amount in past years of advocacy around transportation, and I have to compliment our transportation department. They're very willing where possible. I do think there is an opportunity to look at the program as a whole and logistics from where we are to where we could be and how we could grow. I like what you said earlier about naming the problem, but when we have a problem and we can talk about it and find a solution together, I think this would be a good example of looking at access and equity and where we are and what could be possible by putting many thought partners together. We have made some progress in terms of transportation when we had the boundary moves, but I think it's an area of growth as we look at the program as a whole.
But currently, we don't have anything that allows for parents that do not have the ability to bring their kids to these schools for them to join in this program, correct?
That's correct. If
Okay.
you were to transfer to a program and it wasn't your boundary school, you would self-transport.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I want to share a celebration of collaboration. We have a newly developed joint dual language committee as a result of our latest CBA. And so we have 6 identified KEA representatives and 6 identified KSD leadership. Gami is one of our co-chairs and is going to be leading that conversation with the co-chair from KEA. And I think that the conversations will be rich and maybe some recommendations will come out of that. But there are some stakeholder-involved conversations that we're looking forward to.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate that additional information. I just wanted to make sure I understood it correctly and that I wasn't missing something in that. Thank you.
My question is kind of to the beginning where we're looking at percentages within our different schools. I was surprised to see nearly 1 in 5 of our iGrad students are MLE. And just wondering, could you talk about the appropriateness for, I don't know, I love the program, what iGrad does, but the majority of the time the students are not around other people. It's self-directed learning outside of classroom walls, right? And so I'm just wondering how kind of you're talking about the, context, and how can that happen when you're maybe not around anybody who might be English speaking?
Principal Mike Williams is, in a recent walkthrough that I did with him, we walked through the space where students receive MLE services. It was robust, it was full, and what I sensed was a strong sense of belonging in that culture. So they have specific MLE staff that is designated that support students with their specific services. And while we know that the model is that students aren't there every day, all day at the same time, what I noticed when I walked in was that culture and that positivity, and that students were there to learn. So I can't say it looks like that every day, but there are services that are provided and committed staff that have come to some of our board meetings to speak. And if you visit someday and ask Mike to take you through that specific space that's been designated, we are seeing students that are engaging in ELD.
Any thoughts on, I wonder about homeschools, and specifically the high school, and is there any thought about a way to be able to retain those students better in their home school? And I don't know, I'm not here to problem solve it.
I hear you.
Okay.
Yes, that is definitely a conversation and a challenge we've discussed. I think I brought it up at the last board work session around having system-wide opportunities for credit retrieval in our comprehensive schools. That might look like students who also receive MLE services. I was just walking through Kent Lake yesterday, and Heidi Maurer, the principal there, was just so excited to share some of the deliberate efforts that they're making this year for those credit retrieval opportunities. So our school leaders are seeing the need at the comprehensive level to ensure that all of those services are being provided to the extent possible. MLE services would be one of them.
Thank you.
And if I could just add to that, President Margill, I love the way our team started the presentation today, that our MLE students are general ed students first. And we think about, moving to your question about iGrad, students that are this far away from graduation, technically, as you recall from the work session we had, are those students that they're trying to meet the needs of. If they happen to have MLE services, they are many times 10th, 11th grade, 12th graders that have been in our system, and going back to the whole child approach that we're looking at, I am so proud of the team there, iGrad, that what they're focusing on now is robust in terms of, let's figure out all the needs for this student, whether that be IE needs that they have, and whether that IEP is current or not. That would be a goal, to make sure that we make that current with an evaluation process that needs to be started immediately. Oh, let's see if they are also dually served or twice exceptional, then we need to also have services provided. That is that constant intake process that should be happening. Oh, and what are the things that they are getting or not getting at their comprehensive high school, and how can we make sure that's happening? So I think I hear your question, and some great work is going on there.
Good, thank you. Director Clark?
No, I just want to say how excited I am to see that very clearly you're tracking every kid and making sure no kid falls through the cracks. So just thanks for the work.
Director Song? No. Director Clark? I guess I had one other question that it just tied with our last presentation about the certification, and I'm not going to remember the name correctly, and somebody might get it faster than I. 1200s are goal. Great. Students, world language assessment and seal of biliteracy. I'm assuming that there's a overlap here between MLE and this. And how do we get students excited to do this? Because maybe everybody else's high schooler is different than mine, but sometimes one extra test is not what they're signing up for because they're excited about doing it. What does this partnership look like to really get our students to want to have that?
First of all, I just want to really thank each thoughtful question as a student who was identified as ML, and just I hear the advocacy within the back of each question, so I just personally really appreciate that. Students that currently participate in our dual language program, the goal is for them to receive the seal of biliteracy. So as we are having these conversations through these committees to expand access to these programs and services, the goal is to have more students on that track at the secondary level to being in the program and honoring that their languages to earn the seal of biliteracy. And then there is intersection on making sure we serve, as you saw, the languages. It's not just Spanish as well, but we have many languages, and the goal is to honor the languages that students come in with. And I know we've been trying to have conversations to increase access to assessments so that we honor not just maybe the program language in the dual language program, but if they weren't in a dual language program, how do we honor their home language and their literacy development? And then as far as how do we get students excited, I just think about the work that we've done, that I've done in my past with telling students about the test. I think a lot of times with the WIDA annual, this test, it's just another test unless we tell them the why, the rationale, and get them excited. Like, this is your chance to prove how much English you've learned, or this is the chance we get to celebrate. Because it's sometimes surprising how many students don't know that if they do their best on the test, they no longer have to take that test. And so just having those conversations, and the Elevation platform is one of the ways we're really changing the narrative so that that understanding of multilingual education doesn't just live with the MLE teacher. All staff have access to that. So it really opens the opportunity to share that ownership and responsibility that we all serve multilingual learners. So I think there's a lot more to that question that I don't have the answer to, but it definitely starts with that conversation of who are students, and making sure that everybody that serves the students knows who they are, so that we can start with those conversations.
Thank you. Okay, well, it is 6:55. I would like to say thank you very much for your presentation. I think what really struck me is finding out more just makes me excited to keep asking even more questions and finding out more. Proud of the work that we're doing, but even more of the far vision that we have as a district and where we're trying to get to. So thank you for being our leaders in doing that. So.
And I just want to reiterate the questions from the board were excellent. Those are kinds of questions that really dig deeper into the work that our team does. So and then thank you to our team. There's a correlation to the strategic plan that I just mentioned earlier, and to how we finished our strategic plan today. So thank you to our team, and thank you to our board.
Thank you to our guests that were here tonight. We appreciate all of you. And for those that had to leave between the two, my thanks goes out to the world for them too. So thank you. Have a good night. It is 6:56 and we are adjourned.